Imagine living in Egypt thousands of years ago. There are no pharaohs, no pyramids, no giant temples, no royal palaces, and no single person ruling the entire Nile Valley, just small communities scattered along one enormous river. But then something changes. One person becomes more powerful than everyone else. People begin following him. He controls resources. He commands warriors. He becomes connected to religion. And eventually, his position becomes something much bigger than just being a powerful man. He becomes a king. But here's the fascinating question: how did the first Egyptian king actually appear? Who decided that one person should rule thousands of other people? And why did everyone else accept it? To understand that, we have to go back before the pyramids, before the famous pharaohs, before Egypt even became a unified kingdom. Thousands of years ago, communities were developing along the Nile. The river was everything. It provided water, it supported plants, it attracted animals, and it created opportunities for farming, fishing, hunting, and trade. But the Nile also created a problem. The more people settled in one place, the more they had to organize. Someone had to manage resources, someone had to organize irrigation, someone had to settle disputes, someone had to protect the community. And when communities began growing, that responsibility became more complicated. Imagine dozens of families living together. One person controls access to an important food supply, another person has warriors, someone else controls trade, another person has religious authority. Eventually, these different forms of power can begin concentrating around certain individuals and families. And this is where the story of Egyptian kingship begins. The first rulers probably weren't sitting on golden thrones. They were powerful leaders, war chiefs, community leaders, religious figures, people who could organize others. And as their influence increased, their position could become hereditary. Their sons could inherit their power. Their families could become ruling dynasties. But there was another huge factor: warfare. As communities became larger and competed over land, water, animals, and trade routes, conflict became more important. A leader who could organize warriors had an enormous advantage. Imagine two neighboring communities. One has a leader who can gather 50 fighters, the other has no central commander. Which community is more likely to survive a conflict? The answer is obvious. Powerful leadership could provide protection, and protection could create loyalty. But military strength alone wasn't enough. There was another weapon: religion. Ancient Egyptian rulers eventually became deeply connected with the gods. The king wasn't simply presented as an ordinary human with a crown, he was connected to the divine order of the universe. And this idea became incredibly powerful. If the king was responsible for maintaining order, then obeying the king wasn't simply a political decision, it could become a religious duty. This helped transform kingship from "this person is powerful" into "this person has a special role in the world." And then something extraordinary happened. Around the end of the fourth millennium BCE, Upper and Lower Egypt were gradually brought under centralized rule. Traditionally, King Narmer is associated with the unification of Egypt. Whether the process happened through one dramatic conquest or a longer period of political consolidation, the result was revolutionary. The Nile Valley was becoming one political system. Now, a ruler could control enormous amounts of territory. Taxes could be collected, labor could be organized, resources could be redistributed, armies could be maintained, religious institutions could be supported, and monuments could be built. This is when the idea of the Egyptian king becomes truly powerful. The king wasn't just the strongest warrior anymore, he stood at the center of the entire system. But here's the part that is easy to miss: a kingdom doesn't exist because one person simply says, "I am your king." It exists because thousands of people participate in the system. Farmers produce food, workers build structures, soldiers protect territory, officials collect resources, priests perform rituals, scribes record information, and all of these people help keep the kingdom functioning. The king becomes the symbol at the top of this enormous network. And over generations, the system becomes normal. A king has a son. The son becomes king. His son inherits the throne. Dynasties continue. And eventually, Egypt develops one of the longest lasting traditions of kingship in human history. From these early rulers came the pharaohs we recognize today, the rulers who built monumental tombs, the rulers whose names were carved into stone, the rulers surrounded by temples, priests, armies, and officials. But the story didn't begin with a golden crown. It began much earlier, with communities beside a river, with people trying to control resources, with leaders organizing food and labor, with warriors protecting territory, with religion giving authority a deeper meaning, and with ordinary people accepting a system that became more powerful with every generation. So, how did ancient Egyptians invent kings? They didn't invent the idea overnight. They built it. Power became leadership. Leadership became authority. Authority became hereditary rule. Religion strengthened that authority. And eventually, one ruler stood at the center of an entire civilization, thousands of years later. We remember the pyramids. We remember the masts. We remember the pharaohs. But behind every famous Egyptian king was a much older story. A story about how human communities slowly transformed from small groups beside the Nile into one of the world's first great kingdoms. And perhaps the strangest part is this: the first Egyptian king probably didn't know that the system he helped create would survive for thousands of years.